Diana. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm in the UK, so it is afternoon here. Um, Let me please first thank Tim and Diana for the opportunity to speak to you today. Hopefully it'll be a bit more illuminating than all the World Cup related guff that we've been assaulted with over the past few weeks. Second, what a final. I just think I had to say that for all the self-righteous bluster about the hosting of Qatar. I think that this was probably the best World Cup final I've seen. And I remember 1982, which was brilliant. Well done to Argentina and commiserations to France. Of course, we know who the real winner is, which is Palestine. Or maybe not. I have to give you a little spoiler alert here. I'm not somebody who believes that this has been a huge victory for Palestine, that the fact that the Palestinian flag was waved everywhere has been some sort of a bloody nose for Israel. I don't think it was. I understand why we would want it to be, and I think there are good reasons for this. But ultimately, while it has given us a warm glow inside as Palestinians, and it's provided a timely reminder that actually Palestine as an issue is still very much alive amongst Arab peoples, I'm afraid the World Cup will change little for the better, at least where it matters. It'll certainly do nothing for the Palestinian national team. I think Tamir might speak more about this, which is made up of players from 1967 occupied territory. These are barely able to meet to train because of Israeli travel restrictions. They often have to play their home games in Jordan because of Israeli travel restrictions. And they rarely have a full squad, even when allowed to travel, partly thanks to trigger-happy soldiers or the round up the usual suspects approach to occupation. Nevertheless, some of the images, especially the picture of a victorious Morocco team donning a huge Palestinian flag as they posed photos after beating Portugal, seemed like an important message, particularly to Palestinians, actually, which is this: you have not been forgotten. And I think some of the more superlative sort of reactions to those scenes came from exactly the sense among many Palestinians that that's exactly what's happened, that Palestine has been forgotten, and even other Arabs don't care much. So to see the flag waved repeatedly at the most important sporting event on the planet has been a salve for many, prompting a sense of relief that people still care. Of course, this sense of being shunted aside, going unheard, has long been the Palestinian condition, but there is little doubt that it has reached a peak lately, particularly after the Abraham Accords. So to get a bit political about it, when those accords were first signed, I think Palestinians feared, and still fear, that this could start some sort of a domino effect among Arab countries, to sign similar agreements that really do nothing for Palestinians and serve only to allow Israel to further normalize and consolidate its occupation. We know the accord signed by the UAE, Bahrain, and yes, Morocco have had absolutely no positive effect on Palestinian lives whatsoever. Quite the opposite. We now have the most right-wing Israeli coalition to take power, and there is some competition for that title, let's face it. And even with unabashed and outspoken racists in office, we hear nothing from these Arab countries who had otherwise promised to use their newfound good offices with Israel to help Palestinians. So yes, while Palestinians have long been disabused of the idea that their Arab brethren would someday ride to their rescue, the hope was always that fear of public backlash, at least, would restrain Arab countries from going the other way. So the Abraham Accords came and went and are now a new reality. But the World Cup did seem to show us a slightly different side of the Arab peoples who have little say in the doings of their rulers. So this is where the World Cup was welcome. To see and hear so many supporters from so many countries wave the Palestinian flag and demand Palestinian freedom especially, I have to say, to Israeli journalists, was genuinely lovely and quite funny in parts. And it was comforting to think that at least fellow Arabs have not forgotten Palestine, that whatever the maneuvering of their rulers, there remains love and support for Palestine and Palestinians among the ordinary folks of the region. So the show of public support has been a shot in the arm for Palestinians, much needed, no doubt. But will it prevent, say, Saudi Arabia, should Riyadh be so inclined, from signing another accord with Israel? Will it cause Israeli leaders to think twice about the way they treat Palestinians? Will it improve conditions for people on the ground? I don't think so. If there's any lasting positive effect, it may be that Israelis themselves might come to realize that they remain unwelcome in the region until the Palestine issue reaches a just settlement. The thing is, do Israelis care? I don't think they do. This is an Israeli public that consistently votes anti-peace and pro-settlement parties into power, that has now gone further and given Jewish supremacists a mandate. It's a frightening, frightening situation in Israel, if you ask me. Certainly it is for any Palestinian who lives there, and under Israeli rule in occupied territory, and it shows no sign of ending. The next couple of years, as far as I can tell, are going to be really scary. And there's also no sense that the show of solidarity in Qatar in any way filtered back to Western audiences. Much of the reaction to Morocco's Palestine exploits off the field has been on social media or in Arab media. Certainly no traditional mainstream media here in the UK even picked up on this story of Arab solidarity with Palestine. None that I saw anyway. It may just be the UK, as sort of US coverage of Israel is becoming more critical. The UK media seems to have stuck their collective heads in the sand, fingers in ears, eyes tightly shut, just ignoring Palestine as much as possible. This could be the Corbyn effect, fear of being called anti-Semite. It's a fatigue with a story that doesn't change, or maybe it's just poor journalism. Who knows? It's probably a bit of everything. Until Palestine becomes a story again, there's little to gain from the so-called West. Silence suits those who are complicit with Israel's many transgressions of international law. Let's face it, the less there's written about Palestine, the better for all Israel's friends. Every Western politician must know the contradiction between their espoused principles and their support for Israel. Best not shine a light on that. And that opportunity, which was in Qatar, shine a light on popular Arab support for Palestine, was far too easily passed up by the journalists there, who were otherwise very keen, and quite rightly so, to report on labor rights, women's rights, and LGBTQ+ rights. So for all of the positivity that we saw on social media amongst Palestinians and their supporters, and all the funny clips we saw of Israeli journalists being rebuffed with, you know, Hurra Palestine, etc. I don't think in terms of PR, in terms of putting Palestine back on the agenda, the World Cup really did that much. It did do much, though. It did do something, I should say, for Palestinians. I think it's difficult to, it's obviously very, very difficult to measure in any sensible way. I do think that there is a very deep sense of neglect amongst Palestinians, that they're being forgotten, and their cause is being forgotten and ignored. And it's a sense that is partly as a result of Israel taking full advantage. The fact that nobody's protesting, the fact that Palestinians seem more isolated than ever, and of course, the Abraham Accords. So it was a shot in the arm for Palestinians. It's important to see that solidarity with Palestine remains amongst Arab peoples, if nowhere else. And it was important to see the Palestinian flag waved, regardless. Everything they say is politics, and sport is not different. We can go back and look 1980 Olympic Games and the boycott of South African apartheid sports people, banning now of Russian sports. So politics and sports mix, whatever FIFA and other sports bodies want to say. There is a reason why signs in pubs in Ireland and bars in the US ban politics and sports as topics. They appeal to our tribalism. But, like I say, while I understand the reaction, the positive reaction the World Cup has had, I think it'll have very little actual effect. I will say this, though. World Cup that will give me hope is the one in which, I'm sorry to say, Israel is banned. If that ever happens, it will only happen because the world has finally said enough. And that is a sign of progress, and probably the only sign of progress. Until then, and like I say, it's not to underplay the importance of solidarity. Just like a team on a pitch gains extra energy and extra will to fight from the supporters in the stands, the show of support in Qatar is important to Palestinians to keep morale up. Perhaps not as big a victory as some would make out. Thank you.
That's great. Tamir, if you could come back and let us know what your thoughts are.
Good afternoon for everyone. And thank you, team, and thank you, Diana, for inviting me to talk here. I would like to continue, I think, in the place where Omar stopped. Omar provided a very pessimistic view about the potential influence of this event of the World Cup on the Palestinian case. And I think I share this pessimistic estimate, and I also agree that it has been a very important days for Palestinians to feel that they are not being forgotten, that their case is still in the mind of many millions of people. And I would like to take a broader look on the question whether football and sports in general can have a political effect in the case of Palestine-Israel and maybe more broadly. Historians of South Africa, historians of sports, do make the point that there was a contribution of the sports boycott into the general sentiment of pressure on the public in South Africa and indirectly on politicians. Obviously not the only reason, but it was an element that was important. And I agree that if at a certain point FIFA will decide to suspend Israel, it might have an effect on the Israeli public. And I think if it will happen, it is not because the world finally will come to the conclusion that enough is enough, because there have been enough reasons to do it before. If it will happen, it means that the political balance of power in the international sphere has changed to allow that. And if it will happen, it might have an effect. So, talking about the current situation in Israel, that Israelis keep voting for pro-occupation politics. Yeah, it is true, but I know about surveys from South Africa in 1989 where only 4% of the white population supported racially blind regime in South Africa, and it suddenly changed. So there are many reasons to be pessimistic, but if I want to look for some glimpse of lights, I'm trying to look at what happened in the past, and maybe it could happen, maybe also through football. So this is one aspect of potential influence of football. But I want to look at other aspects. There have been so many focus on an interest on the issue of Palestinian flag in Qatar, and I would like to provide some historical background for that. If you go and try to find out about the history of the Palestinian Football Association, you go to Wikipedia or to other official websites, even Palestinian, you might see that the Palestinian Football Federation was established in 1928. Well, this is officially it's true, but the association that was built in 1928 was a Zionist association, and only in order to satisfy some rules of FIFA, they invited an Arab Palestinian representative to the inaugurating meeting, but practically it was a Zionist football association, and the international games that Palestine participated at the time, at least those recognized by FIFA, were of that Zionist association without any participation of the Arab players in the country. And there was some attempts of the Arab Football Association that was established in Palestine to change that. They appealed to FIFA. There were some diplomatic moves to change it with the support of neighboring Arab countries. But until they were able to gain any success in this effort, the war of 47, 48 erupted, and after that it became irrelevant with the destruction of Palestinian society, including almost all of the football infrastructure that was established in the Arab cities in Palestine during the Mandate period. What is happening after that is that inside Israel, Palestinians who remained, and there were about 160,000 in 1948, they were under a severe and very strict military rule that did not allow them to develop their own football infrastructure. But on the other hand, at a certain point, the Israeli authorities concluded that they cannot prevent the popularity of football, but they can contain it. And they did allow football teams of Palestinians in Israel as long as they're part of the Israeli Football Association. And they even encouraged it in certain ways. And for the Palestinian young generations, especially the men among them, football was a way to compete physically against Jewish Israelis, sometimes win. It was connected to this nexus of masculinity, national pride, and they were attracted to that. But at the same time, in the imagination of many, it was connected to the state, because the state provided the new organizational infrastructure for playing football for Palestinians. The independent clubs were shut down very quickly. And in the long term, and I'm doing now here, fast forward for many years, football has become a way of preserving the political status quo. I conducted some surveys at the turn of the century, 1999, 2000, when you could clearly see that Arab men who do go to football matches, do go to the stadiums in high frequency, tend to be more accepting the political status quo. They were more likely to vote for Zionist candidates in elections, a little bit more estranged of their Palestinian identity. There was a sense that this field is not a field of Palestinian political protest, certainly not. However, sometimes 15 years ago, we see a change. We suddenly, not suddenly, but gradually, since 2008, we see Palestinian flags in the stadium. It did not happen. I am talking now about inside pre-67 Israel. I attended many games. I haven't seen a Palestinian flag until that date. It was not before, because it was illegal, especially after the signing of the Oslo process. The Palestinian flag was seen in public in Israel, in political demonstrations of the Palestinian-Israel in days of national commemoration, Land Day, the anniversary for the events of October 2000, certainly the commemoration of the Nakba that became more public and more massive since 1998. You could see Palestinian flags, but not in the stadium. In a way, we didn't see it because in this unwritten agreement between Jewish fans and Arab Palestinian fans, this is a form of protest, of defiance. And since the Palestinian flags did not want to estrange the Jewish fans or the establishment, they did not bring it. They saw the stadium as a field of, as a sphere of integration and an opportunity, maybe with a hope to be accepted as equal citizens in the state of Israel. But the change happened partly because it didn't function. It didn't help to promote equality. It remained a bubble. It remained what I called an integrative enclave. So especially after the collapse of the Oslo process and the Second Intifada, gradually this approach of using the stadium as a field of rapprochement with the Jewish public was gradually abandoned. And this enabled the bringing of the Palestinian national narrative, Palestinian national symbols into the stadium. And there were also other processes related to that. There is a global phenomenon of politicization of sports that we see also in the United States and in Europe over the past decade. There is also the influence of social media. There is the influence of the political role of football fans in Egypt during the Arab Spring. There are other elements, but certainly this disillusionment from the ability to use football as a channel for integration was certainly influential here. And so we see more and more Palestinian flags in the stadium, more and more Palestinian national protest in the stadium. And we see also something that is relatively recent, that Palestinian stars in the Israeli League started to express themselves politically. And this is new. I did follow this phenomenon. It did not happen in the past. Palestinian stars in the Israeli national team were really very, very careful. Well, anyway, they faced very racist slurs. But in general, the approach of the fans and the association and other players was very inclusive, and the players started to keep it as such. They were really very careful. Recently, Palestinian football stars start to express themselves mainly in social media. And this created a backlash because the association, other players, Jewish fans, they did not know how to deal with that. When, for example, Moanas Dabur, who was a star in the Israeli national team during May 2021, posted a post in social media with criticism against the Israeli policy in Jerusalem, and the reaction was very harsh. He was also booed later by fans during the games of the Israeli national team. And he decided, because he felt that he did not gain the support of his teammates in the team, he decided to leave the team. And this I think we live in a moment of change here, because just several years ago, you had in the same time the highest number of Palestinian players in the Israeli national team. And it represents their professional success. In the last roster, we had only one. This is a sharp decline. There are also some other reasons which are circumstantial, but we cannot disconnect this from the political events. That there is the Israeli national team that was in the past very inclusive, toward Palestinians, and it served the interests of the Israeli liberal media for self-flattering, of we are a country of self-opportunities, and it served the interest also of the Palestinian football players and their fans. So this shared interest was not enough to sustain the tension and to contain the tension that are underground, are taking place outside of the stadium. And this is in the background of this decline of participation of Palestinians in the Israeli national team. And now we're coming to Qatar. The Palestinian national flag that was in the Israeli context is so threatening for Jewish Israelis suddenly appear in Qatar. And it is important to make a pause here and say that in both Israeli and Palestinian national imagination, popularly, the conflict is considered as a zero-sum game, as a total game. When one has a success, as a victory, it means, and visibility, it means a threat for the other side. And this is how it is perceived by the vast majority of Jewish Israelis, among them football fans. So I think the threat that you could see by the reaction of Israeli journalists that Omar just mentioned is especially relevant for Jews of Moroccan background, because in general, there has been lots of sympathy and support for the Moroccan national team among Jews of Moroccan background. I'm saying it based on anecdotes of conversations with acquaintances and friends. There has been lots of support and sympathy, but this sympathy for many became in conflict once the Moroccan team waved the Palestinian national flags. I do not say that it eliminated the support, but it creates a tension, a dilemma for many people. And I think it exposed the dilemma and tensions in the identity of Moroccan Jews in Israel, that in general, even though they have suffered from discrimination and marginalization, they were certainly were integrated, at least at the narrative level, into the Zionist story, and adopted in many ways the historical narrative of the Ashkenazi movement that created the Zionist project and the state of Israel. And at the same time, they have these nostalgic sentiments and sympathy for Morocco. So, so this is where we saw this tension, that everything came together. The importance of football for both Palestinians and Israelis, the power of symbols, and especially the Palestinian national flag, and its very, very charged meanings for both Palestinians and Israelis. So I think I will stop here, and we'll be happy to hear questions from the audience.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. We've got a bunch of really good questions already come in. I'm going to start with one from Brooke Maddox, who's based in France, but I feel like what she says applies definitely for here in the UK. She says, here in France, where I live, there was considerable television and radio coverage of the pro-Palestinian interventions during the Qatar World Cup, but it was overshadowed by the call to boycott the games because of the appalling treatment of migrant workers, ecological catastrophe represented by the games, the flagrant violations by Qatar of LGBTQ and women's rights and so forth. So people found it difficult to separate the issues, i.e. to support Palestine and the other Arab teams like Morocco during the Cup, while condemning Qatar for its flagrant violations of human rights. So there's no real question in there. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that comment, because I know here in the UK, I felt that conflict as well.
Up to you.
Well, I think that you could say, well, that there are many good reasons justify or reason to be angry about Qatar hosting and what was happening with the violation of human rights. The issue is here that it is conflicting with the fact that there is no universal standards for the frustration of many, because I wish 4 years from now we will see the same level of protest and anger when the United States will host this event. We can start already now. This is a country where you have still death penalty, a country which has more people in jail than any other country in the world, and the exploitation of undocumented workers here is really atrocious. Now, I do not want to make this whataboutism about Qatar. There are problems. The protest is right. I cannot say that there is no real case here. I just hope for to make it credible that it will be applied in a different context as well. And if we will be able to have the power to influence countries to change the ways, and it includes certainly the United States, I will be happy to use this power through sports, but not to do it only against Qatar. And again, I think if we bring back Omar's comments earlier, if we would like to use football as a way to influence politics, suspending those countries which are at the edge of violating human rights from FIFA will be a nice way to start. So let's go to this direction. I will be there.
Yeah, I can't really add much to that. I was going to mention that the next World Cup is going to be in the US, and the last one was in Russia. And so the coverage this year has been very critical, which there's nothing wrong with. And there are legitimate reasons for being critical of Qatar, definitely. And the fact that, but Palestine is a separate story. And so, yes, if there is consistency, you can be critical of Qatar and critical of and bring this story of Palestinian solidarity to fore without the two necessarily clashing. I think it is a shame that at a sporting event where solidarity with Palestine was so prominent, it was kind of undermined by the controversy over the host. But that's just the way it is. I don't imagine we'll see the same level of Palestine solidarity in the US next time, sadly. But it would be good, like Tamir says, if the same level of scrutiny is applied.
Thanks for that. We've got a couple of comments and questions about Celtic and their support of Palestine. So we've got from Patrick Lonergan, who says he follows football in the UK and he's seen Celtic fans display the Palestinian flag at home games. Sections of Celtic fans, of course, identify with Ireland and have supported Ireland's conflict with the UK in the past and therefore have this affinity with the Palestinian cause. And Diana Neslin, I find it interesting that in Britain, open support for Palestine is sanctioned. For instance, Celtic fans, Celtic was fined when their fans flew the Palestine flag and the flag was banned. Our politicians support the silencing of Palestinian voices. So at least in Qatar, Palestine was amplified. Do you have any comments on that, the Celtic debate?
I mean, the one comment I would make was that if you're going to have a policy, be consistent with it. And so when Forest Green Rovers or Celtic are penalized for a show of support for Palestine, then don't allow the Ukraine flags, etc., 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 which were very prominently allowed over the past months. So you just be consistent, really. I think Celtic, I know some Celtic supporters, and I know that much of that has to do with spillover from Northern Ireland. But I am very happy for their support, and I myself am a Celtic supporter in return. So there you go.
And I think what we see among Celtic supporters, which it came from Northern Ireland, it's in a way an extension of the sympathy to the Palestinian cause in the Third World, in the previously colonized countries. So it comes from Ireland exactly for this historical background of certain sympathy for people who are victims of colonialism. This is the connection. Sometimes what happened with symbols that at a certain point they lose their original cause. Like, I'm not sure that today every Celtic fan is aware that there is a connection. It's like Tottenham or Ajax, they have Israeli flags, and I'm sure many of the supporters have not really, they don't have a good explanation for that, because there is, now it became an arbitrary symbol, like other logos of teams. But this is how I see it as an historical background for them.
Well, I will say that Celtic fans are always keen to buy me a drink at the pub when they hear that I'm Palestinian. So for that, I am grateful eternally. And this is another question from Patrick Lonergan. I think it's Lonergan, otherwise it's Eonergan. Can Tamir clarify if Palestinian players play for teams like Haifa and Maccabi, who play in the Champions League and Europa Cup? Are there Israeli teams that ban Palestinians, either outrightly or indirectly?
Yeah, actually, there are Palestinians are they play in Israeli professional teams. They represent Israel, especially Maccabi Haifa. Maccabi Haifa specifically has a tradition of including Palestinian players, and it goes back to the 1950s, long before you had the Palestinian players in other Israeli teams. And this is why, at least until the ascendance of Sachin as the flagship of the Palestinians in Israel, Maccabi Haifa has been the most popular team among Palestinians in Israel by far, no doubt about it. And I think I do not have contemporary data, but I think it is still there. The support for Maccabi Haifa among Palestinian fans is huge, and it is related to their inclusion of Palestinian players, no doubt about that. Now, the rule that I mentioned of having Palestinian players in every professional team in Israel in the top division is Beitar Jerusalem. Beitar Jerusalem is it's not an official policy of not hiring Palestinians. They cannot say that officially, but every time the managers were trying just to hint in this direction of hiring a Palestinian player, the protest that came from the fans was so harsh that they just stepped back and didn't do it. The history of Beitar is not, Beitar Jerusalem has been a right-wing club since it was established in the 1930s. Someone even described them as a terrorist organization who had a football club. Basically, many of the players were members of the underground Irgun at the time. But until the 1990s, they were not explicitly racist in terms of chanting anti-Arab slogans and this death to the Arab slogan that we can hear now. Something happened in the 90s related to the particular place of Jerusalem in the conflict. Gradually, since the 90s, the explicit racism of Beitar became part of their identity. And this is tragic because one of their songs is that we are the racist team of the country. Like they adopted this slogan. And I do not see that it is going to change. It became part of the team's identity.
Can I just ask, is there a link between how mixed a town or city is in terms of Israelis and Palestinians, and how mixed their football team is, or is that just completely irrelevant?
Well, there is, but the link is not so clear, because Haifa is a mixed city. And it has been related to relatively good relations between Jews and Palestinians. And it goes back to the mandate period. Collaboration, work together in the field of work, labor, shared strikes. There is a history in Haifa for that. In Jerusalem, the fact that it is a mixed city, but is with an extremely hierarchical structure. So you have a city where the Jews are citizens and the Palestinians are not. This is not the case in Haifa. There is inequality, but they're both Israeli citizens. So I would say that there is a relation, but it's a very complicated one. It's not a linear one. It does not go to the same direction in each context.
Well, complicated and depressing is the theme of most of our webinars. So.
Yeah. Can I ask Tamir, after the Abraham Accords were signed, the UAE, I think, bought a stake in Beitar, Jerusalem?
There was a move toward that, and then it turned out that the businessman who intended to buy Beitar Jerusalem from Dubai, I think, there was something wrong with his account. It probably he did not have the asset he claimed to have, and this was it was removed from the table. But the interesting thing is the phase between the announcement until it happened, because the reaction of the fans of at least the hardcore fans of La Familia, which is the ultras of Beitar Jerusalem, was very harsh. They said, "What? No price is worth that to be owned by an Arab team, and we don't care if they're our friends from the Gulf. We just don't want that." It was interesting that they really stood against that with, unambiguous resistance.
Yeah. No, I just thought it'd be interesting to highlight that because it was touted as one of the possible benefits of the Abraham Accords, but
I was really interested. I looked forward to the moment when they will be bought by an Arab team and to see the reaction of the fans. It didn't happen, unfortunately.
Well, you saw this. You kind of saw the reaction of the fans.
No, but will they continue to go to the games? I don't know. It's.
Oh yeah.
Well, we've got a couple of questions regarding FIFA. So, for example, Derek Payne says, what pressure is being put on FIFA over the issue of settlement teams playing in the domestic Israeli leagues? This is not only against international law, but it's also against FIFA's own rules. Tamir, do you want to take
what would like to talk?
Well, I don't actually know what FIFA are doing about that specific issues. I would say FIFA have recognized Palestine as a proper member, as a full member of its organization, which means they recognize Palestine as a state, which is an interesting departure because not every member state of FIFA obviously does the same. So FIFA has been positive, at least in some respects. So I'm not sure though on this particular issue.
Well, I can add to that in 1998, Palestine was accepted as a member of FIFA. And it has participated in, there was a Palestinian national team even before that, since the 1950s, but the Palestine was accepted to FIFA in 1998. And if I'm not wrong, it was in 2015 when the Palestinian Football Association demanded that FIFA will ban Israel, because Israel includes teams from the settlements in the Israeli Football Association, which is, it contradicts FIFA's rules. But it was not enough to contradict FIFA rules, because you need also the political power to impose these rules. and Palestinians did not have this political power inside FIFA to make changes. Don't expect FIFA to just implement some abstract universalist moral values. This is not how FIFA works. There is politics there. And as long as Israel has the political power in FIFA, it will not happen. Again, things will change if the general political imbalance of power will change. But as long as this is the situation, I do not see it.
Yeah, so we have a couple of comments about Russian teams being banned from international competitions and the hypocrisy of that. So you're saying that this is, again, more politics, and we shouldn't be expecting some sort of blanket policy to apply to all.
Well, only if you have the political leverage with FIFA, I think it seems to be. I think that, you know, this idea that sports and politics are separate is just not. They're very, very basic, actually, in many ways, and very similar. I think that I've had plenty of old South Africa journalists who covered the end of apartheid tell me that actually one of the really defining moments was the sporting boycott, because rugby and cricket and other sports played a very, very important role in South African identity and sense of themselves. And so, like I said before, I think the one World Cup where I will sense some change is the World Cup where Israel has been banned, because I do think these have, of course, enormous power, such boycotts, and I do understand also why, you know, people are reluctant to go there. So once enough political pressure has been built up, like we've seen with Russia, after a year, well, 8 at most, once enough political pressure has been built up on FIFA to ban Israel, then enough political pressure has been built up globally to actually do something about it. Until then, I'll be skeptical that sports will change anything.
And is there anything that we can do? This has come from a bunch of different people in different ways, but is there anything that we can do as individuals here based in the UK? Is there, you know, does writing to FIFA help? Do we bring it to the attention of the media? What can we do to help bring that along?
I think making your voice heard always helps, insofar as it's another voice to add to it. Will it take a long time? I think it'll take a very long time. I think FIFA, of all sports organizations, is eminently influenceable, if you like, in that it's a somewhat dodgy organization that's very centrally controlled. But you've got to be able to pull those levers, and I'm not sure Palestinians are able to do that. I think it'd be very fruitful if they did. I'm not sure what anyone as an individual could do other than just voice your displeasure, voice your support for a boycott, not be afraid of voicing a support for a boycott, because even raising that possibility apparently seems controversial these days.
Well, I agree. The only thing that people can help is keep raising their voice. With the hope that it will accumulate at a certain point to a critical mass.
So, audience, please do share this webinar with anyone that you think might be interested, because we'll be going on the website by tonight, so it will be shareable. This question is from me. Which one do you think would be more impactful and also most likely to ever happen? A World Cup where Israel is banned, or a World Cup hosted in Palestine?
Well, I think one has to come before the other. That is Israel banned first. But who knows? Maybe we can avoid that whole issue, but I see no signs of it at the moment. I'm sorry, I'm pessimistic.
So are you asking about World Cup that will take place in Palestine?
Yeah, wouldn't that be fun?
Currently,
I know, highly
I
unlikely.
would say where,
But so is
where-
Israel being banned. I know it's highly unlikely, but I feel like so is Israel being banned at this point. So I was just wondering which one would be better for us and which one would be.
well, I don't think that, I think if football will take place in Palestine at the moment, it will still be under Israeli rule and it will take place according to the Israeli conditions. So I don't see it as something positive. Obviously, it's a fantasy. It's not something that's going to happen. You're not having, such a tournament in this kind of political environment. But I want to say something about this issue of boycott. That there is an argument that you hear from the more liberal side of Israeli politics, that football is the place where there is more rapprochement between the Jews and Arabs, so why target this area? You hear it a lot. And it does not come from the right wing, it comes from more the liberal forces in Israel. Said, well, leave football alone. This is where Jews and Arabs come together. And it's true, if you go to the Israeli, most of the team, you do see Palestinian citizens of Israel, Jewish citizens of Israel play together. Okay. But the argument here is that football is a relatively tolerant sphere of the Israeli politics. But last year I made a survey and I compared the tendency of people in Israel, or Jewish citizens of Israel, to accept equality, to accept inclusion of Palestinians in Israeli politics, or having a Palestinian party in the coalition. Are they ready for that? And you would expect that if football is such a power of tolerance, there will be, among football fans, you will find a higher level of acceptance. By the way, we did find something like that among fans of Liverpool. After Mohamed Salah became a star in Liverpool, according to one study, you could see less Islamophobic attitudes among Liverpool fans compared to before. So it could happen. But what I found is that actually there is no difference between Israelis, Jewish Israelis who are fans of football and other Jewish Israelis. Actually, politically, it's the same environment exactly in the other side. So at least this as an argument against boycott, I do not find as valid.
Yeah, no, I think I'd agree. I think, like I said before, football is uniquely tribal in a way that politics is actually. Not many other things are. And as a result, I think that it's very easy in the head of a football fan, I'm a football fan, to separate your tribal allegiance to your football club with your political beliefs, and even let them contradict as much as possible. That's not an issue. The issue is loyalty to your ideas, really. And so I think that, I mean, I'm surprised to hear that you suggest that football is somehow a liberal sphere. It's not the common thing associated with football fans. But I certainly don't see that as a boycott, as an argument against boycott. I do think the power of a sports boycott is precisely because sports are generally popular. This is a real sort of slap in the face of whatever country is being boycotted. And the fans of their sports. So that's a proper conflict between loyalties. So that's an argument for a boycott, of course.
Thanks for that. So I've got a question from Ian Drummond. Would a broader based national team, I presume Palestinian national team, with players from the refugee diaspora, 48 may be too difficult, be a good idea to have a bigger pool of talent and be less dependent on the tender mercies of the IDF? Would this even be possible under FIFA rules?
I think I'm happy to start with that. I think certainly it would be possible. I think as the Palestinian Authority has the power to determine who is a Palestinian, who's counted as Palestinian. One practical problem would be, of course, that presumably those players from the diaspora would need Palestinian passports, and these passports are ultimately approved by Israel. And so it would be very simple for Israel to control who would then count as a Palestinian. But in theory, that practical sort of obstacles, if you set that aside, in theory, I'm all for any kind of move in any field that brings diaspora Palestinians and Palestinians on the ground closer together, particularly in the area of PLO reform. That's a different issue. And I think it's very important for so many reasons, mostly probably for Palestinians and diaspora, to be connected. So I think it would be a great idea. I think the practical impediments are, at the moment, certainly insurmountable.
I mean, not to mention training timetables and so forth, but it
Oh,
would
sure.
mean,
It
would mean that you and I, Omar,
if there's
finally
no
have our
political obstacle to that, then I think you could overcome that somehow. But yeah, if the Israelis are going to ban people from taking on Palestinian IDs, then it's not going to happen.
All right, well, we'll just have to wait for our moment, won't we? I've got a question, I think, for you, Tamir. What from Simon Marchant? What about school football teams? Do Israeli and Palestinian children play in the same teams at school level?
It almost does not exist, because Israel has separate education systems for Jewish Israelis and Palestinians. It's partly because of language. So there are schools in Arabic, schools in Hebrew. They just do not share the same schools. There are very like a fraction of percentage of Jewish Israelis and Palestinians go to the same schools. There are about 5 bilingual schools in the country, and they don't have, as much as I know, a football team. They're small. So they do meet and compete against each other in the high school competitions, but not on the same team.
Thanks for that. I was going to end on a high note, but I am not, because the next question is from Megan Singodia. How can we highlight naming and death of Palestinian players? For example, Bakr brother in Gaza by Israeli occupying forces. We've had quite some incidents of Palestinian football players being injured. Is that something that can be raised with FIFA, or have we abandoned the idea of raising things with FIFA?
Oh, no, I think it is raised with FIFA. I know that particularly after Jibril Rajoub took over. I mean, I think football is a political platform as well for people who are involved in it. And so when Rajoub took over the Palestinian Football Federation initially, and now the Olympic Federation, I think he's been quite keen to raise this with FIFA. And FIFA has come out with some words. But it's FIFA. I mean, it's not, you know, it is at the end of the day a football organizing body, not a political body. The main function, positive function FIFA could play would be to ban Israel. But beyond that, after that, it's just words from a footballing body that are easily ignored. In terms of bringing to light the sort of wounding of Palestinian footballers, well, they're just people, you know, and like any other Palestinian in occupied territory, they're in the line of fire, and they're young men generally, so even more in the line of fire. And so I think that yes, you can highlight it, and possibly every article on Israel's football team should be accompanied with a clause, a sort of standard clause going, by the way, Israel wounded however many Palestinian or imprisoned or banned or whatever. But beyond that, I'm not sure how that separates itself from the general sort of situation.
Well, I agree. The problem is that Israeli snipers shoot Palestinians, not that they shoot Palestinian footballers. Sometimes they happen to be footballers. So it could be highlighted, but it's not a separate issue.
Thanks for that. I will end on one more question because I want to help Brian Chapman out with his problem. He says, as a Fulham fan and a Palestinian supporter, I feel compromised as an Israeli player joined our squad. Should I give him my full support anyway? So like you were saying, this conflict of loyalties. Any advice for Brian?
Enjoy the football. Give him a stern lecture about the treatment of Palestinians before and after every game and see how it improves his performance or not.
Well, I wouldn't target individuals because of their nationality. So we have political issues with Israel. You can boycott Israeli goods, boycott Israeli diplomats. If you have player is a player, as long as he's not a representative, an official representative of the country.
So wait and see if he voices any political opinions himself, and then decide whether to support him as an individual or not, right? Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. This was very much last minute planned webinar, and we're really grateful for you making time because it just felt really timely with the World Cup, obviously, and you know, everyone a bit freer now that they don't have football matches to watch, so why not a webinar on football? So thank you so much, Omar and Tamir. I hope you have a lovely festive season, and thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. Now's my time to do a little plea, as you know I always do. We like to keep these webinars free because we want to have as many people attend as possible, but we are entirely dependent on donations. So please do consider, if you wouldn't mind, donating the price of a cup of coffee or something. I've posted a link to our donate page in the chat box. And better yet, you can sign up to be a friend of the Balfour Project. That means signing up to donate a regular amount, monthly or yearly, of any amount, and you will get free tickets to some of our paid events like film screenings online and so forth, and some other benefits here and there. We just had our first friends meeting where friends were able to have a chat with Vincent Fien, our vice chair, and Andrew Whitley, our chair, as well as Sandra Hamrouni, the chair of our executive committee, to get an idea what the project is up to and so forth. So please do, I've just got a report that my link isn't working, so I will post a link to the website and then you can click on the donate button. Thank you very much for David Wetton for bringing that to my attention. So once again, thank you so much, all of you, for coming along, and especially Tamir and Omar for joining us. I will be sharing the chat box with them, so they will see all of your lovely comments and also the questions I didn't get to. Thank you very much and have a lovely evening. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.